My name's Scott, you're watching Regular Veteran, and today I'm just going to give you a montage of all of the presidents that have invoked the Insurrection Act and the speeches that they made to the American public regarding what they had to do. Almost every time the Insurrection Act has been used, it's been for some sort of race-motivated riot. And really, having looked into the Insurrection Act, it just makes me think that it's a way for the government to stay in power. That's really all it's there for, because a rebel force is never going to be able to use the Insurrection Act. We need to do better, America. Let's do better. It's been over 150 years since the Civil War ended, and yet we're still here talking about those fucking losers' flags. Get them out of here. They were the real insurrectionists, and they were squashed. The fact that we're not renaming the army bases that are Confederate named is ridiculous. And thank you, Marine Corps, for banning the displaying of Confederate flags on your installations. It's progress. The GI Rights Hotline is absolutely one of the most important things to be talked about right now. Number's 1-877-447-4487. That's the GI Rights Hotline. If you feel like you're being told to do something that's unconstitutional, if you're being given an unlawful order, call that number. They've got your back. If you have something that you're trying to deal with the VA, they're actually a really good resource from the looks of it. Their website is girightshotline.org. Check it out. Also, I have to tell you that if you feel like your voice hasn't been heard and you've suffered from any sort of domestic abuse in the military, the number is 833-919-0680, and the email address is survivor2020@gao.gov. And I've seen them testify to Congress. I'm telling you, they seem like good people trying to create positive change. If you have felt like your voice hasn't been heard, this is the place to be heard. They're not asking you to recount everything that happened. They want to know what barriers you saw as a victim so that the next person that suffers from something like that can get better results and get better resources.
We are putting everybody on warning. Our 7 o'clock curfew will be strictly enforced. Those who threaten innocent life and property will be arrested, detained, and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I want the organizers of this terror to be on notice that you will face severe criminal penalties and lengthy sentences in jail. This includes Antifa and others who are leading instigators of this violence.
Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts. Now let me make it very clear that federal troops are not being used to relieve local and state authorities of their primary duty to preserve the peace and order of the community.
I'm sure that the American people will realize that I take this action with the greatest regret, and only because of the clear, the unmistakable, and the undisputed evidence that Governor Romney of Michigan and the local officials in Detroit have been unable to bring the situation under control. Law enforcement is a local matter. It is the responsibility of local officials and the governors of the respective states. The federal government should not intervene except in the most extraordinary circumstances.
Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
The running of our school system and the maintenance of peace and order in each of our states are strictly local affairs, and the federal government does not interfere except in very special cases and when requested by one of the several states. In the present case, the troops are there pursuant to law solely for the purpose of preventing interference with the orders of the court.
We must respect the process of law, whether or not we agree with the outcome. There's a difference between frustration with the law and direct assaults upon our legal system. In a civilized society, there can be no excuse for the murder, arson, theft, and vandalism that have terrorized the law-abiding citizens of Los Angeles. Mayor Bradley, just a few minutes ago, mentioned to me his particular concern, among others, regarding the safety of the Korean community. My heart goes out to them and all others who have suffered losses.
I hope that every American, regardless of where he lives, will stop and examine his conscience about this and other related incidents. This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal, and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. Today we are committed to a worldwide struggle to promote and protect the rights of all who wish to be free. And when Americans are sent to Vietnam or West Berlin, we do not ask for whites only. It ought to be possible, therefore, for American students of any color to attend any public institution they select without having to be backed up by troops. It ought to be possible for American consumers of any color to receive equal service in places of public accommodation, such as hotels and restaurants and theaters and retail stores, without being forced to resort to demonstrations in the street. And it ought to be possible for American citizens of any color to register and to vote in a free election without interference or fear of reprisal. It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color. In short, every American ought to have the right to be treated as he would wish to be treated, as one would wish his children to be treated.
I'm also federalizing the National Guard, and I'm instructing General Colin Powell to place all those troops under a central command. What we saw last night and the night before in Los Angeles is not about civil rights. It's not about the great cause of equality that all Americans must uphold. It's not a message of protest. It's been the brutality of a mob, pure and simple.
The fact of the matter, however, is that law and order have broken down in Detroit, Michigan. Pillage, looting, murder, and arson have nothing to do with civil rights. They are criminal conduct, and the federal government, in the circumstances here presented, had no alternative but to respond, since it was called upon by the governor of the state, and since it was presented with proof of his inability to restore order in Michigan. We will not tolerate lawlessness. We will not endure violence. It matters not by whom it is done or under what slogan or banner. It will not be tolerated. This nation will do whatever it is necessary to do to suppress and to punish those who engage in it.
And let me assure you, I will use whatever force is necessary to restore order. What is going on in LA must and will stop. As your president, I guarantee you this violence will end. And now let's talk about
One law and order, and that is what it is. One law. We have one beautiful law. And once that is restored and fully restored, we will help you, we will help your business, and we will help your family. America is founded upon the rule of law. It is the foundation of our prosperity, our freedom, and our very way of life. But where there is no law, there is no opportunity. Where there is no justice, there is no liberty. Where there is no safety, there is no future. We must never give in to anger or hatred. If malice or violence reigns, then none of us is free. I take these actions today with firm resolve and with a true and passionate love for our country. By far, our greatest days lie ahead. Thank you very much, and now I'm going to pay my respects to a very, very special place. Thank you very much.
The option to use active duty forces in a law enforcement role should only be used as a matter of last resort and only in the most urgent and dire of situations. We are not in one of those situations now. I do not support invoking the Insurrection Act. First, National Guard forces did not fire rubber bullets or tear gas into the crowd, as reported. Second, Guardsmen were instructed to wear helmets and personal protective equipment for their own protection, not to serve as some form of intimidation. Third, military leaders, including the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were wearing field uniforms because that is the appropriate uniform when working in a command center and meeting with troops in the streets. Fourth, it wasn't until yesterday afternoon that we determined it was a National Guard helicopter that hovered low over a city block in D.C. Within an hour or so of learning of this, I directed the Secretary of the Army to conduct an inquiry to determine what happened and why, and to report back to me. Again, that was not a military decision. It was not a military action. The National Guard was there in support of law enforcement. With regard to your second question, I would just say this much: I'm not going to comment because I've asked that an inquiry be made. I want to make sure I understand why, what happened, who was involved, what orders were they given or not given. Was there a safety issue involved, right, with an aircraft hovering that low? So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. I spoke to Secretary McCarthy last night about it. He is digging into it, and we will get the facts, and we'll go back from there.
All right, in the room, Tara.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So you served in the D.C. National Guard.
I did. That's
to
right.
follow on Nick's question, were you surprised that a medical helicopter from the D.C. National Guard was used to intimidate people who were peacefully assembling? And then secondly, as this goes on, you've asked the Secretary of the Army to look into this, who tasked the helicopter.
Right.
Was the helicopter under the authority of the Department of Justice? Is that why there's this kind of murkiness about how the helicopter was tasked, how a medical helicopter was used in an aggressive form?
Yeah, so those are some of the details we have to tease out in terms of, who directed it, what was request, was it at the request of law enforcement?
Your understanding it was not a medevac mission?
That's right. To my understanding, it wasn't. I need to, I'm sorry, but I need to actually head to the White House.
Always maintain a keen sense of situational awareness. As senior leaders, everything you do will be closely watched. And I am not immune. As many of you saw the result of the photograph of me at Lafayette Square last week, that sparked a national debate about the role of the military in civil society. I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics.
Minneapolis, they went through 3 nights of hell, and then I was insistent on having the National Guard go in and do their work. It was like a miracle. It just, everything stopped. And I'll never forget the scene. It's not supposed to be a beautiful scene, but to me it was. And fourth, we're renewing our call on Congress to finally enact school choice now. School choice is a big deal. Because access to education is the civil rights issue of our time, and I've heard that for the last, I would say, year, but it really is. It's the civil rights issue of our time.
I'm going to be reviewing the movie The Five Bloods. It just came out yesterday. It's a Spike Lee about 5 black Vietnam veterans that go back to Vietnam. It looks like there might be some gold or loot impetus, as well as looking for an old friend. So I'm really excited about what that brings. Thank you so much for watching today. It's been a really interesting news episode. My name's Scott. You're watching Regular Veteran. I'll see you on the internet.